Before something becomes visible in 3D, it exists somewhere else. Before a conflict surfaces in a relationship, it existed as a tension in the emotional field between two people, sometimes for months before either person could name it. Before an illness manifests in the body, it often appears first as a pattern of energy, a compression in the system, a subtle wrongness that the body has been signaling long before the diagnostic test confirms it. Before a creative idea reaches the page, it exists somewhere between the unconscious and conscious mind, felt but not yet formed. The physical world in this sense is rarely where things begin, it is where they arrive. What lies between the invisible origin and the visible manifestation, that is what we are exploring today. Most spiritual and esoteric traditions describe some version of a subtle layer of reality that interpenetrates the physical world, a field where thought, emotion, symbol, and energy interact in ways that are more fluid, more responsive to intention, and more formative than anything in the dense material realm. The Western esoteric tradition calls it the astral plane. Qabalistic tradition calls it Yetzirah, the world of formation. Sufi metaphysics calls it the Alam al-Mithal, the imaginal world. Tibetan Buddhism describes bardos, intermediate states where forms are fluid and consciousness navigates by orientation rather than by physics. The names are different. The structure they are pointing toward is remarkably consistent. My name is Jonathan. Welcome back to Alchemy of Remembrance. Let me try to describe the astral field as precisely as language allows, which is imprecisely because we are talking about a layer of reality that language was not designed for. The astral is not another place in the way another planet is another place. It is a layer, a dimension of reality that coexists with the physical rather than being located elsewhere. Think of it less like a separate territory and more like a different frequency of the same territory. The way radio waves and visible light both exist in the same room but require different instruments to perceive. In the astral layer, forms are responsive. They are shaped by consciousness rather than simply observed by it. Thought and emotion leave impressions there in ways that thought and emotion leave almost nothing in the purely physical world. An intense emotional event, a grief that was fully felt, a joy that saturated the body, a terror that imprinted itself on the nervous system. These do not only register internally, they register in the field, they leave resonances. This is why certain places carry specific emotional qualities that everyone who enters them can feel without being told anything about them. A room where a traumatic event occurred often retains a quality that sensitive people detect immediately. A space where generations of genuine prayer happened carries something that feels qualitatively different from a space that does not. The physical structure is identical, but the field is not. The astral is also the layer in which archetypal forms exist most powerfully. The symbols, the mythic figures, the deep images that appear in dreams and visions and synchronicities, these are not purely internal projections of the individual psyche. They are structures in the field formed over millennia of collective human experience, most of the time even manipulated by the archonic broadcast algorithms to maintain the false ascension matrix, and available to individual consciousness as a kind of deep library of form. Now, I would like to offer here a map that I find extraordinarily useful. It comes from the Western esoteric tradition and specifically from the Hermetic Qabbalah, a system we will explore more fully in a later video. The Qabbalah describes reality as organized into 4 worlds or 4 levels of manifestation. These are not separate universes. They are interpenetrating layers of a single reality, each denser and more particular than the one above it. The highest world is Atziluth, the world of pure emanation. pure, undifferentiated divine light. No form, no distinction, only the closest approximation to the source that can still be called a world. Below it is Beriah, the world of creation. This is where the first forms appear, not yet manifest but beginning to take shape as archetypal patterns. Then comes Yetzirah, the world of formation. This is the level that corresponds most closely to what we mean by the astral plane. Yetzirah is the world of the angels in Qabalistic theology, but more broadly, it is the world where patterns, emotional, symbolic, imaginative, begin organizing themselves into the specific forms that will eventually crystallize into physical reality. And finally, Asiya, the world of action, the dense physical world we navigate with our five senses, the last stop before matter, the realm of consequences. What this map suggests, and what I think is enormously practically useful, is that change in the physical 3D world often needs to begin in 4D Yetzirah, in the astral, in the formative layer where patterns are still fluid. If you try to change a pattern only at the level of Asaya, only at the level of behavior, of external circumstance, of physical intervention, without touching the formative layer beneath it, the pattern tends to reassert itself. Basically, because you have addressed the symptom without touching the architecture. Now, let's touch on something that most modern people struggle with, and I understand why, because the culture we were all raised in spent considerable energy convincing us of this one thing. Imagination is not real. This statement, which most people have absorbed so thoroughly they experience it as obvious, is actually a very recent cultural assumption, and it is, in the frameworks we are working with today, straightforwardly false. In virtually every pre-modern philosophical and spiritual tradition, imagination was understood not as the faculty that produces fictions, but as the faculty that perceives subtle reality. Henry Corbin, the French philosopher and scholar of Islamic mysticism, spent his career arguing precisely this. The imaginal world is not the imaginary world. The imaginary produces things that are not real. The imaginal perceives things that are real but not physical. Dreams in this framework are not mere neural noise during sleep. They are access, imperfect, symbolically mediated, filtered through personal material to the formative layer of reality. The symbols that appear in dreams are not random. They carry the compressed intelligence of the astral field processed through the individual psyche. So even if we want to believe that everything we see in our dreams is just a projection of our subconscious, that is an incomplete explanation, because dream space can be easily contaminated and be used against the human psyche, because the dream state is the state when humans are quite vulnerable. Nonetheless, active imagination, the practice Carl Jung developed and described in his work, and which he pursued intensively through the Red Book period, is the deliberate cultivation of this faculty. The conscious engagement with inner imagery is not an analysis but a genuine encounter, allowing the images to move, to speak, to surprise you, discovering that they carry information you did not consciously know you had. This is one of the primary methods through which the astral layer becomes accessible, not through spectral travel or dramatic out-of-body experiences, though those phenomena exist, but through the simple and extraordinarily available faculty of genuine imaginative attention. Now, I want to bring the astral out of its purely personal register and into the collective, because this is where its implications become most significant. The astral field is shared. It is not a private space accessed individually, like a personal hard drive. It is more like a collective cloud, a field that all human consciousness participates in, contributes to, and is influenced by. This means that the quality of the collective astral field at any given historical moment is shaped by the sum of what humanity is collectively thinking, feeling, and imagining. And it in turn shapes back. The feedback loop is real. And along with that, archonic broadcasts, solar system events, terrestrial events, extraterrestrial interferences all exist here. For instance, periods of intense collective trauma, wars, pandemics, genocides, collective fear deposit enormous amounts of unresolved emotional charge into the astral field. That charge does not disappear when the physical events end. It persists, it influences the emotional weather of subsequent generations. The unexplained anxieties, the collective undercurrents of dread or violence that seem to arise from nowhere in historical cycles, these are often in part the unresolved deposits of previous collective trauma percolating through the astral layer. And archonic entities love to use these astral deposits in 4D and their astral broadcasting technologies to use against the human psyche, especially to block their true ascension, to keep them in a state of trauma and anxiety, or even in a false light in the astral. But conversely, collective beauty matters too. Genuine collective prayer, genuine collective art, genuine collective healing, these also deposit into the field. Some sacred sites, among other things, are points where the accumulated resonance of genuine collective devotion has been deposited into the planetary field over centuries. They carry that resonance. This is why the personal healing work we talk about on this channel always has collective implications. Every time a person genuinely integrates a trauma pattern, rather than continuing to project it outward, they remove a small piece of that charge from the field. The field becomes slightly cleaner. The collective emotional weather shifts incrementally from dissonance to the direction of coherence. Now, let me close this session with some practical techniques, because all of this remains abstract unless it connects to something you can actually work with. The most basic practice for developing sensitivity to the astral layer is also the most ordinary. It is simply paying attention to the between, the space between thoughts. For instance, the quality of a room before you have thought anything about it, the felt sense of a person's presence before they have said anything, the emotional texture of a piece of music, a landscape, a piece of writing, the quality that is transmitted through the work but is not reducible to its technical components. Most people move through these in-between moments on autopilot, immediately filling the space with analysis, label, and interpretation. The practice is to pause in those moments, to stay with the quality rather than immediately naming it, to let the subtle information arrive before the cognitive apparatus rushes in to translate and diminish it, to really start building this ability to sense the extrasensory. This is the beginning of astral sensitivity, not a dramatic version of becoming a psychic aura reader overnight, but an ordinary, daily available technique, and it is more powerful than most of the theatrical alternatives out there. From there, start your dream work. Keep a dream journal. Not to analyze the dreams immediately, but to record them with fidelity and then stay with the images across time. Patterns emerge, symbols recur. The astral layer begins to feel less like another dimension and more like another language, one that you are slowly becoming fluent in. But you must do your shadow work to decode and engage with your deep mind as well, because in the beginning, the dream world could be filled with your subconscious projections. And this also gives the parasitic entities in the astral to hook onto those emotional charges. That's why you need to master proper psychic protection as well. But as you do more and more inner child work, the more you integrate your shadow, you get to a point of being a non-judgmental observer in the astral. The more you start observing the astral realms from an emotionally detached point, the less you will be a louche generator for the archons. And you will be able to transcend the false ascension matrix superposed on earth by the so-called Anunnaki false gods. More and more dream work will actually make you realize that this whole reality is actually a dream, more like a game. But for now, I leave your experiences entirely to you. I let you do the practices and see for yourself what you realize. And from there, I would suggest also practicing active imagination, the deliberate engagement with inner figures and images as if they were real. Because in the framework we have been exploring today, they are real, not as physical objects, but as structured intelligences within the imaginal field. The mistake is to dismiss them as fantasy simply because they do not obey material rules. The practice is to engage them with clarity, discipline, and observation, allowing what emerges to reveal information, pattern, and meaning that the conscious mind alone cannot access. Sit with an image that repeatedly appears in dreams or meditation. Ask it directly what it represents or what it wants you to see, and then observe what arises without forcing the answer. The practical test is simple. If the encounter produces insight, emotional movement, or a recognizable shift in perception that your ordinary analytical mind could not have manufactured so cleanly, then something real has occurred. So, to conclude, the astral field or the 4D is not merely a fringe concept. It is the layer where your reality is first written before it becomes fixed in form, or in other words, manifest in 3D. Understanding it, even provisionally, even imperfectly, changes how you engage with your own inner life and with the world. It makes you more psychically active and aware. Eventually, you will also be able to connect to the causal realm, the cause-effect relationships between events and their embeddedness into the wheel of time or the Kala Chakra. We will deep dive into those practices in due time here, but for that, one needs to have their third eye chakra open as well, which remains calcified for most of us here on this planet. Next week, we get very practical and go into the topic of psychic protection, what it is, why it matters, and the specific practices that do create genuine energetic sovereignty, especially for people who are sensitive, empathetic, aware, and tired of absorbing what is not theirs to carry. Besides, psychic protection becomes also very important as you do your shadow work, dream work, and start navigating the complex astral plane of 4D. Before saying goodbye for today, I would like to say that we are truly going through a planetary ascension now, a frequency shift. The fake matrix that was superposed on the original Gaia is dissolving rapidly. The archons, who base their survival solely on separation, war, competition, jealousy, poverty, and so on, are losing their grip from this planet. So, keep repeating the mantra, I am monad, every day. Keep your shadow in balance and keep healing. That's it for today. I am Jonathan. This is Alchemy of Remembrance. Thanks so much for being here. I will see you in the next one. Have a blessed day ahead.